that Oscar did not do anything to cause his death. You know, there's been no testimony about anything that Oscar has done that was either violent or combative in the sense that the police officers had to use deadly force. Mehserle.
As you sat there and listened to that officer speak and watched the video, what was going through your mind?
What was going through my mind was that he wasn't telling the truth. I mean, when we clearly look at the video and relate that to his conversation as far as what he say happened, it's clearly seen by everyone that he's lying. You know, so there's no relevance to what he's testifying to. What he's doing is trying to protect one of his friends, which is a police officer that did a murder.
And the fact that there was all this chaos in the train, there was a fight on the train before it arrived at the station. What do you think of that? That was
the question is, what kind of fight are we talking about? We hear throughout the testimony that it was shuffling and wrestling and people crowded up together and bumping among each other. So there was no fight. The only fight that took place was on the platform by the BART police.
Yeah.
That was the fight that took place. Them doing the punching, the kicking, the kneeing, the cussing.
And the murder.
So you don't believe the gentleman who testified there was pushing and shoving and hitting?
No, we do not believe it.
Let me say, so what? There may have been, and I don't want to concede that there was nothing. I don't want to take the position that nothing happened on the train. I don't want to take that position because people have testified that people seem to be of goodwill. I mean, there was nothing to suggest to me that the people who testified that there was something on the train did not occur. That's not our position. Our position clearly is that whatever happened on the train, it did not justify the conduct that took place. And number two, whatever happened on the train, at the time the officers arrived on the scene, it was over, number one. And number two, the officers did not have any information as to whether this Oscar or anyone else was involved in the information. The broadcasting went out that there had been a fight on the train. They could see that. The next point was there was African Americans. They didn't say how tall, how skinny, how complexion. They didn't say anything. No one has testified, but I assume that there were many African Americans on these particular trains. The officer Peroni comes up to the train. He said, "I know who you are," to the group. He didn't know who it was. And so it was more of an intimidation to try to get someone to come forward. The point is, even if he could do that, assume he could do that, reasonable suspicion, I will concede the police have a right to conduct an investigation. Assume that. So then they come out. But what do you get to do with them then? You don't get to rough them up just because they were involved in something earlier. You don't get to violate their civil rights by then pushing them, kicking them, kneeing them because they haven't responded in the way that you want. They did have a right to say, "Why are you arresting us?" You can even call them names. None of that justified the police officers to use excessive force. I don't care if Oscar Glenn had used all kind of profanity, which I don't know that he did. Any kind of profanity to any of these people. I wasn't arrested. You don't have a right to arrest me. I haven't done anything. He doesn't have a right to resist an arrest. There's no question about that. But that in and of itself doesn't mean you get to kick him. It doesn't mean you get to punch him. It doesn't mean you get to throw them down, sit on them, and then shoot them in the back. Period. Regardless of what he had done.
Ms. Johnson, I think you had something you wanted to tell us earlier. Is there something you wanted to say here as you watch this?
I'm just sad that BART is not taking responsibility for what has occurred with my son. They're still allowing the officers, they're still paying them each week for paid leave. They have heard testimony over testimony that Officer Peroni was very aggressive from every single witness, and yet they still continue to pay him weekly. That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable to the people of Oakland, California, and every other county in this United States that BART runs, because he should be reprimanded, the other officers should be reprimanded, and justice shall be served, and it will be served.
It's important that,
You're angry as you watch these videos and this testimony.
I'm disappointed with the lies that is occurring. The officer who testified, clearly he's an officer of the law. He's been in the field for several years. He should be able to explain a situation without the hesitation, without the I'm not recalling. He has been trained in this field. He knows his job. And from what he was saying, it tells me that he's lying, and Bart is still trying to cover up the situation, which is unacceptable.
Right now.
You know, there's one additional point I just want to make here. I heard the names of the witnesses. I was a little bit late, and I don't know if I heard Officer Peroni's testimony that he's going to be called as a witness. He's not going to be called. I didn't hear his name. But he is the 800-pound gorilla in this room because he is the instigator of all of this. And more importantly, we know that Mehserly made some statement to him at the very outset about what his intentions were. So the absence of his statement speaks volume to the defense's point of view of not coming forward and putting all the evidence on the table that they think that goes to the mental state of Officer Peroni and Officer Mehserly to disprove that this is a murder case.
So Raines' suggestion that he intended to use his taser, I mean, that's what he's claiming. You don't buy that?
Well, I haven't heard any evidence that Mehserly had said that. I haven't heard that. I mean, I know that the police reports, I know that there's public statements to that effect, but Mehserly has never said that to any of the officers on the night that this happened or anything after that. So I don't, that may very well be a contrived, convenient theory because I don't have any evidence to support that.
That's what Mike Raines says his case is.
I understand, but you got to prove it. If he comes forward with evidence when Mehserly says that's what he said, well then you take that into consideration.
And you represent all the young men that were there with him. None of them heard him say, I meant to tase him, or I'm going to tase him.
No, that's not true. I did hear from him. One of the kids did say, I want to tase him.
One of the kids.
Not a big kid.
Wait. Once again, tell me what you're saying.
The young man, one of the young men on the scene said he heard Mehserly say at some point that I want to tase him. So we know that that was said. And we don't dispute that that was said. And that's before. The question that I have is, what did he say afterwards? Because wanting to do it at one point doesn't mean you did. That's what you intended to do when you did it. The question is, what after it happened, did he make any statements to the effect, I made a mistake, I meant to reach for my taser? Words to that effect. And that's what is important because that's a spontaneous declaration before you've had an opportunity to think about what the defense ought to be. What did you say spontaneously when the first opportunity presented itself? And that's what we're sort of...
In the video, you see it looks like Mehserly has a taser out much earlier.
Yeah, that means he knows
Is that when you're saying the young man said he heard that, or is this immediately before the shot?
I'm not certain about that. I know the young men were being threatened with tasers. Dominici, Peroni, I know were threatening them with tasers. At least that's what they will testify to. And I know that Mehserly at some point in time said that I want to taser. When that happened with respect to Mehserly, I'm not quite certain. It did happen. My point is, what did he say immediately thereafter?
What young man said that? Was it one of the young men against the wall, or what young man was that?
It was one of the young men against the wall.
And he said that he heard him say that about, Mehserly say that about Oscar Grant. I want to tase him.
Well, I don't know if he said it about Oscar Grant or not.
Okay, but he heard him say, I want to tase him. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.